What would you do if you walked into a luxury store and were asked whether you could even afford to touch the merchandise? If the manager laughed in your face, called security to throw you out just because you weren't wearing a designer logo without knowing you could buy the entire building if you wanted to? This isn't just a story about discrimination. This is a story about how a woman who was publicly humiliated quietly bought out the very system that looked down on her and transformed it into a global symbol of fairness and dignity. From being shoved through a glass door to igniting a revolution in the luxury beauty industry. She didn't scream. She didn't break anything. She simply stood up and rebuilt everything in a way the world never saw coming. Don't take your eyes off this video, because the story you're about to hear may make you rethink one question. What does true class really look like? The midday sun poured down on Madison Avenue, making the glass facades of luxury boutiques sparkle stores where a single glance could hint at the value of everything inside. Noelle Carter walked into Veron Luxe, one of New York's most exclusive cosmetic boutiques, with the calm poise of someone who had nothing to prove. She wore a cream cashmere sweater, dark tailored jeans, and sleek handcrafted leather shoes. No flashy logos, no expensive designer handbags, no extravagant jewelry. The only item of real value on her was a platinum wedding ring set with a deep blue sapphire, a symbol of love, not status. No one in the store knew who she was. No one recognized that this woman had once been the chief strategist behind 3 successful startups, or that she was hosting a charity gala that evening with tickets priced at $50,000 apiece. They only saw her skin color, her simplicity, and silently concluded, she doesn't belong. And then, just as in the script so many people of color have lived through, it began with the cold glance of a staff member. Then came the long silence. No one approached. No one offered assistance. 3 white women entered after her, one in Chanel, another in a tennis dress, and a platinum blonde draped in fur despite it being September. Each was warmly greeted. Champagne was served. VIP doors opened. Smiles appeared on cue for the right people. Meanwhile, Noelle, though standing near the high-end skincare display, was ignored. She didn't look flustered. She simply observed, eyes calm, steady. But then, a voice rang out behind her, freezing the entire space. "Ma'am, this isn't a place to browse or take pictures. We don't offer samples to customers," with no intention of making a purchase. The voice belonged to Gregory Langston, the store's manager. Gray suit neatly pressed, silver hair slicked back, a face masked by a politely fake smile. But his eyes brimmed with disdain. Noelle turned, her dark eyes meeting his without a flicker of fear. "I was just reading the ingredient list. I'm interested in this skincare set." Gregory chuckled coldly, deliberately raising his voice. "You know, those products, they're worth over $20,000. Do you have proof of income? A diamond credit card? We've had plenty of people like you come in, just to take pictures for social media." The words "people like you" sliced through the air like knives. Discrimination didn't have to be shouted, it just needed to be sharp and perfectly timed. Other customers turned to look. Some pulled out their phones. No one intervened. Noelle said nothing, didn't argue, didn't resist. And that's what unsettled Gregory the most. No one could read what was unfolding behind those calm, steady eyes. Not until 2 security guards walked over without a word. One took each of her arms, lifting her from the polished marble floor, escorting her out like a thief. She didn't protest, just adjusted her sweater, took out her phone, and made a short call. "Julian, I'm fine, but you won't believe what just happened." On the other end, Julian Marks, her husband, a tech billionaire known for buying out 3 major firms after they refused to fund scholarships for underrepresented students, heard every word with perfect clarity. Gregory Langston didn't know that through his arrogance, he had just turned a customer into the future owner of the very empire he managed. And that was only the beginning. No one could understand the calm in Noelle Carter's eyes as she was pushed out of Veron Luxe unless they knew where she came from. She wasn't born into wealth, nor was she raised in elite classrooms from an early age. Noelle was the daughter of Jamaican immigrants who arrived in Atlanta with nothing but a battered suitcase and a dream larger than the city they chose to call home. Her mother worked at a low-end hotel, switching shifts constantly to clock in more hours. Her father was a taxi driver who had driven thousands of passengers without ever once getting lost. Both of them quietly sacrificed everything so their daughter could have the opportunities they never dared to imagine. Noelle's childhood had no luxury vacations or name-brand toys. What she had was observation nights spent beside her mother, gently wiping the red, swollen welts left on her skin after using a discounted cream recommended by a store clerk who casually said it was good enough for someone not needing high-end stuff. Those moments etched a lifelong principle into Noelle's heart. Quality should never be used to exclude. It is a right everyone should have access to, especially those who've been denied opportunities simply because they didn't look the part. Noelle wasn't someone who let life teach her lessons and then forget them. She learned, and she learned exceptionally well. After graduating as valedictorian from Booker T. Washington High School in Atlanta, she earned a full scholarship to Howard University, then secured a prestigious MBA at Stanford, where she was often the only black student in many discussions about corporate diversity. She didn't stand out because she spoke loudly. She stood out because she spoke at the right time. And when she spoke, people listened. It was at a community tech development seminar where she met Julian Marks, a quiet man so wealthy that Forbes had to revise its rankings after he closed a major deal. Julian had met hundreds of people who surrounded him for funding, selfies, and clout. Noelle was the only one who walked by, without even looking at him. That was what Julian never forgot. Their love wasn't loud. Their wedding had just 40 guests. When they signed the marriage certificate, Noelle kept her last name, Carter. "This name was given to me by my parents. It's proof of the life they lived for me," she said, and Julian nodded, full of respect. Though the wife of one of the most powerful men in America, Noelle never flaunted it. She didn't hire bodyguards, didn't need an entourage, and didn't wear expensive things just to make a point. Her confidence didn't come from a crocodile leather purse, but from the way she could walk into any room without needing to prove who she was. That morning, she called a ride herself, refusing her private driver. The charity event that night, planned and funded by her, would gather investors, artists, and underprivileged students she had personally supported through scholarships over the past 5 years. All Noelle wanted was to pick the perfect skincare set for that evening, a task that should have been simple, private, and deeply personal. She didn't ask for special treatment. She didn't demand privilege. She simply wanted to be treated like a normal person with basic respect. And because of that, the way Veron Lux treated her with coldness, suspicion, and contempt wasn't just a personal insult. It was a raw reenactment of a long-standing system of exclusion. A system that Noelle Carter, with the heart of Jamaica, the mind of Stanford, and the grit of an entire generation, was not going to let stand. Inside Veron Lux, the air was scented with delicate notes of white orchid and sandalwood, creating the illusion that every breath passed through layers of refinement. This was not merely a cosmetic store, it was a temple of purity, where price tags were absent because asking for the price was considered gauche. Noelle Carter entered, not eager, not uncertain. She had walked through more sophisticated spaces than this. But this time, the difference wasn't in the products, it was in the gaze. As she waited at the main counter, 3 white women entered after her. The first, a middle-aged lady draped in Chanel and holding a crocodile Hermes bag, was instantly greeted. "Welcome back, Mrs. Vanderholt," a staff member beamed. "Your limited edition collection has arrived. Please enjoy some champagne while browsing." The second, athletic build with neatly styled red hair, was ushered into the VIP consultation room, a custom-designed space with lighting tailored to different skin tones. The third, a platinum-haired girl wearing a fur coat in September, had her coat taken the moment she walked through the door, like a Hollywood starlet. And Noelle, not a single glance, not a single greeting, not even the courtesy of acknowledgement. She quietly moved toward the Lumiere Absolue skincare display, a limited collection of only 100 sets worldwide, with ingredients extracted from organic pearls and Arctic plants. It was the exact set she had thoroughly researched and intended to purchase for that evening's gala. As she focused on reading the ingredients printed on the side of the serum bottle, a cold voice pierced the stillness from behind. "Are you lost, ma'am? This is the premium products section, not a gallery for photo ops." Noelle turned to find Gregory Langston, the store manager, wearing a strained professional smile and an evaluating stare that scanned her from head to toe. Her simple outfit, devoid of logos, reassured him that she could be dismissed. "I'd like to purchase the full Lumiere Absolue set," Noelle said calmly. "I have an event this evening and I'm very interested in the new botanical extracts." Gregory raised an eyebrow as if he'd just heard someone talk nonsense. "You do realize that set is worth over $20,000, don't you? Do you have income verification? A bank statement? We've had quite a few. People like you come in just to touch expensive items and take influencer pictures." The phrase, "people like you," dropped into the quiet room like a stone into a glassy lake, rippling out waves of prejudice. No one spoke. Some customers looked away. Others began quietly lifting their phones to record. Noelle didn't respond, but this time her gaze was no longer soft, it was razor sharp. "I don't carry my bank statements when I go shopping," she said evenly, "and I doubt the other customers here were asked to do so." She tilted her head slightly toward the VIP room, where another customer was laughing over a glass of champagne. Noelle's words reflected the entire injustice of the moment like a sudden, blinding mirror. Gregory gave a tight, dismissive chuckle. "I won't argue. You're making other customers uncomfortable. I'll have security assist you out." Without waiting for another word, he gestured. Two tall security guards in black suits with wireless earpieces approached from opposite ends as if handling a security threat. Their hands clamped down on Noelle's arms, lifting her off the polished marble floor and dragging her toward the exit. The entire ordeal, from the contemptuous look to the aggressive manhandling, was recorded, from overhead security cameras to shaky iPhones in the hands of nearby customers. And just a moment after being pushed onto the sidewalk, Noelle slowly took out her phone and dialed a familiar number. "Julian, it's time we had a conversation." She didn't need to raise her voice, because she understood. What had just happened wouldn't stop at the revolving door of Veron Lux. It would go further, deeper, and reach straight into the heart of an industry still asleep atop its own prejudice. When the call ended, Noelle remained standing there amid the rush of people on Madison Avenue as the early autumn breeze rustled the trees in front of the Veron Lux store. But she no longer felt cold. Perhaps it was because, deep in her heart, a fire had already begun to burn, not one of explosive rage, but of sharp clarity, forged from a lifetime of learning how to master her emotions to protect her dignity. On the other end of the line, Julian Marks didn't need to ask many questions. Just hearing how Noelle said the words "store" and "they" told him everything. It wasn't the first time he'd witnessed the woman he loved endure prejudice, but it was the first time he felt that the power behind that humiliation could be permanently shifted. Julian didn't yell, he didn't slam his desk. He simply stood up from his workspace in the penthouse overlooking Central Park, removed his rimless glasses, and said plainly, "Call Marcus. Assemble the team now." 12 minutes later, a private conference room on the 42nd floor of Marks Tech headquarters lit up. On the massive screen appeared the logo of Halcyon Prestige Holdings, the parent company that owned the Veron Lux brand along with more than 50 other luxury labels. "I want majority ownership within 8 hours, Julian said, without raising his voice. Not a second later. For most people, that would have been impossible. But for Julian Marks, a man who once acquired a leading microchip manufacturer simply because they declined to fund STEM scholarships for students of color, anything was possible, especially if it meant delivering justice. He wasn't buying out of revenge. He was buying because a transfer of power was needed from those who preserved privilege to those who understood the pain of exclusion. The meeting quickly shifted from market analysis to acquisition strategy. Julian had no interest in destroying a brand. He wanted to change it from the inside out. Marcus, the chief legal advisor, quickly identified an opportunity. Halcyon Prestige is under shareholder pressure due to a dip in last quarter's earnings. If we target the dispersed strategic shares, we can quietly secure 68% without triggering major alarms. Good, Julian nodded. Complete it by 4 a.m. But he wasn't done. Silence was even more important. Absolutely no one is to reveal the identity of the investor. Until tomorrow morning, I'm still Julian Marks Tech CEO, not the new owner of Halcyon. The room went silent. No one questioned him. They were used to how Julian operated. Success didn't need spectacle. Justice didn't need announcements. It needed the right timing. By the time the clock neared 2 a.m., the acquisition agreements for majority ownership had been signed electronically, routed through various legal entities. Julian didn't need his face in the headlines. He only needed to show up at the right place, at the right moment, and let those who once humiliated his wife realize the truth, in the very space where they had once felt safest. Some staff within Halcyon's internal network may have heard whispers about a formidable new shareholder, but no one would have guessed that the woman they had dragged out of the store like a trespasser was the wife of the man behind the quietest takeover in the history of their luxury empire. Noelle knew, Julian knew, and in just a few more hours, the world would know too, because before justice arrives in all its brilliance, it always begins in silence. 8:58 a.m. Madison Avenue bustled as usual, but something different was taking shape in front of the Veron Luxe boutique. A quartz-gray Rolls-Royce Phantom glided to a stop in front of the store, its long, gleaming body forged from silence itself. Seconds later, a second Phantom, same color, same design, pulled up beside it. Then came 4 jet-black Escalades, lining up like a precision military formation. Pedestrians paused. Employees in nearby boutiques peeked through curtains. This wasn't just a display of luxury, it was the silhouette of a silent declaration. From the first rows stepped a man in a tailored suit. Miles, the loyal driver who had witnessed Noel being forced out of the store less than 24 hours prior. He opened the rear door with a formal gesture, as if aware that the moment to follow would go down in luxury retail history. Noel Carter stepped out, standing tall, her gaze cold and sharp. She wore an ivory pantsuit, devoid of any logos, yet every seam was tailored so precisely that even the most discerning observer would have to pause in admiration. Her natural hair was pulled into a neat bun, held with a simple gold pin. No handbag, no sunglasses, nothing to distract from the sheer power of her presence. Behind her stood Julian Marks, in a perfectly fitted charcoal suit, his face unreadable, but each step he took radiated undeniable authority. Following them were 12 Marks Tech legal advisors, each carrying a leather case embossed with the company's silver-foiled logo. Inside the store, the staff began to realize something was wrong. "Who are they?" one clerk whispered. That looks like Julian Marks," another replied, voice trembling. Gregory Langston, the store manager, was in his back office reviewing sales when he heard the murmurs. He jumped to his feet, adjusted his tie, and rushed to the front. In his mind was a vague image of Julian Marks from a Forbes magazine, a name he had heard, never expecting it to appear in his store. When his eyes scanned through the large glass window and landed on the woman stepping out of the car, his heart dropped to his shoes. "No, it can't be," Gregory stammered. "That's her, Noel? She's Julian Marks's wife?" His face visibly drained of color. He was no longer the confident manager who had publicly humiliated a woman for looking too plain. No longer the man who had arrogantly ordered security to escort her out. Standing before him now was the new owner of the very empire he worked for, and he knew that every action he took the day before had been recorded, archived, and now awaited confrontation with consequences. As the revolving door slowly turned, Noel entered. The temperature in the room seemed to drop instantly. All eyes turned to her not with scorn now, but with the dread of truth on the verge of exposure. Julian didn't need to speak. One nod, one glance, and the dense silence said it all. The owner had arrived, and he did not come alone. Gregory stepped forward, trying to muster a professional smile. "Well, welcome to Veron Luxe. It's truly an honor." But Noel didn't shake his hand. She stood upright, looking at him with the gaze of someone who had endured the weight of an entire culture's prejudice and who was now ready to answer it with intellect, dignity, and the full force of a legal team. The power dynamic had reversed, and Gregory Langston knew he was no longer the one commanding the board in this story. The air inside Veron Luxe no longer carried the luxurious fragrance of oud and rare essential oils. It was heavier than that, weighted with fear, with the looming sense of an impending quake no one was prepared for. When all staff had been gathered in the main hall per orders from Julian Marks's legal team, the silence was thick, like the eye of a storm yet to hit. Every person from sales associates to customer care supervisors looked around in confusion, not one daring to speak a word. Julian stepped forward, but it was Noel who led the way. She stood there, calm and resolute, a mirror of the image from the day before when she had been dragged through this very hall by hands that didn't ask, didn't apologize, and didn't care. Then Julian spoke, not loudly, not angrily, but each word landed like a seismic tremor on the marble floor. "We're not here to shop." He paused, eyes sweeping across Gregory Langston, now small and diminished in the very room he once treated like his domain. "We're here to cleanse this system." At that moment, one of the legal aides nodded, and the lights in the store dimmed. On the opposite wall, a large temporary screen lit up, and the video began to play. First came the surveillance footage from the previous day, Noel entering, being ignored, then questioned, then insulted by Gregory in front of everyone. The cold, cutting words, "We don't serve people like you. Do you have proof of income?" now rang out, undeniable. All eyes turned to Gregory. The once proud man now hung his head, sweat beading on his temples. Next came a stream of data pulled overnight from the entire Halcyon Prestige holding system by Julian's team. 87% of white customers were served within the first 30 seconds. Customers of color waited, on average, 4 times longer. 92% of front-facing staff were white, despite operating in racially diverse cities. Complaints of discrimination had risen 38% over the past 12 months, but Julian wasn't finished. Not just Noel, not just yesterday. The back door opened. 5 individuals walked in, each a different face, each with a story. All were customers of color who had been harmed by the very system now under fire. An elderly woman spoke first, voice composed but laden with pain. "I'm Dr. Elaine Moore, Chief of Cardiology. I was once asked if I'd wandered into the luxury section by mistake." Next, an Indian entrepreneur. "They followed me from the moment I walked in. I spent over $40,000 that day." No one smiled. No one said thank you. Then came a Latino judge, a student of color, and a black artist, each recounting their experiences. Each testimony another cut through the glossy facade of Veron Lux. None of the staff objected. No one defended Gregory. Truth needs no judgment. It stands on its own. And then, 3 former employees stepped forward, each fired for speaking up. One had emailed a discrimination report and was reassigned to the stockroom. Another refused to prioritize white customers on the VIP list and was dismissed a week later. The mood in the room had shifted from confusion to heaviness, and now to public shame. Julian turned to face the entire staff. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to rebuild. But before we create anything good, we must first dismantle the rot embedded in every brick." And in that moment, everyone understood. What happened yesterday was no longer a mistake. It was a system. And that system had just been brought into the light. The light from the projection screen had just dimmed, but the echo of truth still lingered in the air like smoke after an explosion. No one spoke. No one needed to. In the marble-floored grand hall of Veron Lux, this was no longer a showroom for luxury cosmetics. It had become a courtroom, one that required no jury, because the evidence was too clear. Julian Marks stood silent for a moment, letting everyone absorb each story, each drop of humiliation that had been denied by those working under this very roof. Then he turned to Gregory Langston, his voice low and resolute, like a judge delivering a sentence. "You're fired, effective immediately." Gregory froze. His face went pale, and his hands trembled so violently that the folder he was clutching slipped from his grasp. Everything that once symbolized his authority, a tailored suit, a gold-plated name tag, a condescending stare, was now just a hollow shell, stripped bare before justice. "No, please don't," he whispered, voice drained of all confidence. "I've worked here for 12 years. This is my life." The room remained silent. There were no defenses, not a single look of sympathy. Those who had once obeyed his every order now stared down at the marble floor, as if afraid to meet a gaze that might force them to confront themselves. Only then did Noelle speak. She didn't raise her voice. It was just loud enough for everyone in the room to hear, clear and undeniable. "I don't need anyone to know who I am to be treated with respect." She took one step toward Gregory, her eyes not filled with anger, but with the clarity of truth in human form. "I didn't walk into this store to be treated like a VIP. I only wanted to be treated like a person. But you decided I didn't deserve that based on appearance, not character. That was a mistake, and that mistake has a cost." Gregory wanted to respond, but there were no words left to defend a belief system that had collapsed right before his eyes. Julian turned to the staff, his gaze not threatening but discerning. "Those of you who tried to do the right thing, we know. Every small act has been noted." He nodded toward Jasmine, a young employee with kind eyes, the one who had tried to intervene the previous day when Noelle was being forced out, with a simple question. "Are you sure you want to do this, Mr. Langston?" Julian continued. "We will retain people like Jasmine, those who held on to their humanity within an inhuman system." Then came the announcement no one expected, a directive that sent shockwaves through the entire luxury retail industry. Effective immediately, we are shutting down all 52 Veron Lux locations worldwide for a complete restructuring from the ground up. Gasps erupted. Some employees were stunned, others relieved, because they knew unless the walls came down, there would never be room for windows to open. Julian stepped up to the small podium in the center of the hall, his gaze steady on the team standing before him like students awaiting their fate. We're not restructuring because of financial failure. Sales are still rising, but ethics have hit rock bottom. If you can't look at a customer and see a human being, then you no longer belong here." His eyes slowly scanned each face, finally resting on Noel. "Today, we're not punishing a person. We're rebuilding an entire system." And indeed, that internal reckoning wasn't just a conclusion to one act of discrimination. It was the prologue to an entirely new chapter, where dignity would be the first and the last requirement for anyone to enter a world called true luxury. 6 months after the earthquake at Veron-Lux, Madison Avenue welcomed an entirely different sight. Where once stood a symbol of exclusion and privilege now emerged a new presence, quiet, unassuming, yet arresting. The store's signage had changed. Equité, a French word meaning equity. Its slender bronze gold letters glowed gently against a textured white stone facade, like a confident whisper that true luxury doesn't need to shout. The doors opened, not the cold, imposing glass that once reflected the wary eyes of security guards. Gone was the invisible divide between the deserving and the suspect. Instead, visitors stepped into a space that was warm yet refined, designed by a team of multinational architects. Natural stone merged with reclaimed wood. Soft lighting didn't blur the customer's face, but instead honored it the beauty of every skin tone, every wrinkle, every unique feature. Product prices were now clearly displayed, transparent, accessible. Gone were the unspoken questions like, "Can you even afford to ask?" Each item was accompanied not only by a full list of ingredients but also a small QR code linking to reviews from scientists and real users, because truth, at Equité, was never meant to hide in the shadows. And the staff? A mirror of the city they served. Black, white, Asian, Latinx. Some were young and radiant, others older retired dermatologists returning to work because they believed in this new mission. No two were alike, and that was the point. Each name tag included the employee's name, nationality, and languages, spoken, a small gesture that made every customer feel seen and understood. And at the center of it all was Noelle Carter. Not just the woman who stood tall in the face of cruel discrimination. Not just the one who refused to stay silent for the sake of keeping peace. She was now the global creative director of Equité, the architect of a new philosophy for an industry once obsessed with exclusion. Noelle didn't change to fit the position. The position had to change to be worthy of her. At the press conference launching the new flagship store in New York, she stood at the podium, elegant in an unbranded beige jumpsuit, her makeup soft, her gaze steady as cameras pointed toward her. "We didn't create a new brand to chase ethical trends," she said. "We created Equité because it's time the definition of luxury changed." She paused as if inviting the entire room to take a deep breath before the next line. "Luxury, to us, is no longer the right to stand above others. It's the ability to recognize value in everyone." Applause erupted, not because Noelle was the wife of a billionaire, but because she had transformed personal humiliation into the beginning of a transformation for an entire industry. Equité wasn't just a new name. It was a promise written in action. A space where every skin tone was treated like a VIP. A testament that equity doesn't diminish value, it makes value truly meaningful. And as Equité opened its doors across major cities around the globe, people weren't just buying cosmetics. They were reclaiming something that had once been taken from them. To be seen, to be heard, to be respected. When the Equité brand officially launched, what industry experts once cautiously labeled as an experiment quickly became a global phenomenon. In an industry long fueled by exclusivity, hierarchy, and silent exclusion, Equité didn't just survive, it thrived. System-wide sales rose by 37%, far surpassing even the most optimistic projections. Financial analysts who once claimed that high-end consumers will walk away if they stop feeling special now had to admit the feeling of being welcomed turned out to be the true luxury the market was missing. One of the brightest highlights of Equité's success was its extraordinary expansion into communities historically overlooked in marketing strategies. People of color, LGBTQ+ individuals, people with disabilities, and older customers. No one had to struggle to find a shade that matched their skin tone. No one was met with judgmental glances as they walked through the door. No one had to prove they were worthy of being treated like a human being. 70% of Equité's current staff are people of color, from diverse backgrounds ranging from a Ghanaian cosmetic chemist to a former packaging designer who once worked at a trans rights organization. 65% of mid- and senior-level management positions are held by women or people from marginalized groups, including many who were previously excluded from hiring rounds at competing luxury brands for not fitting the brand image. But what grabbed headlines wasn't just the numbers, it was how Equité redefined the philosophy of luxury. Forbes called it a quiet revolution, but one that cuts to the very root. Vogue Business described, Equité doesn't sell the feeling of being superior. They sell authenticity, and that, it turns out, is far more desirable. And the New York Times published an editorial titled, "When a woman once thrown out of a store becomes the face of luxury, the world must take a hard look at itself." And indeed, the world did. Within just 3 months, rival brands began quietly reforming their hiring policies, publishing customer demographic data, and launching outreach campaigns toward minority communities, things they previously deemed brand risks. At an industry summit in Paris, the CEO of a 120-year-old cosmetics company openly admitted, Equité has changed how we define luxury consumers. They are no longer a group we select, they are everyone, if we learn to respect them. Inside Equité, transformation wasn't limited to structure or branding. It lived in every meeting, every training session, every hallway conversation. The internal culture emphasized mutual learning, encouraged employees to speak up, and prioritized product development that reflected the real-world diversity of its customers, not the monochrome ideal of a fabricated market. As creative director, Noelle Carter continues to uphold one principle: never forget the moment she was thrown out of a store just for being herself. Not out of bitterness, but as a reminder. We didn't build Equité to retaliate. We built it to prove that you don't have to look like anyone else to be respected. Now, when consumers talk about luxury skincare, they don't just ask about hydration or peptide content. They ask, does this brand reflect my values? And many of them are finding the answer in 3 syllables: Equité. Not by shouting that it is right, but by living rightly, every single day. Inside the 3rd-floor training room of Equité's headquarters, warm ceiling lights reflected off the attentive faces of new employees. The space was designed like a cozy vintage tea room, welcoming, intimate, and free from the feel of mass corporate training. Because to Noelle Carter, the first thing an employee needs to learn isn't the price list, it's how to see the person behind every pair of eyes that walks through the door. During their first 3 months, every employee must participate in a program called Understand and Serve, personally led by Noelle. There, they don't just study the products, they learn to identify unconscious racial bias, recognize invisible privilege, and dismantle assumptions based on skin color, clothing, or voice. There are no tests. Instead, real-life scenarios are reenacted, personal stories are shared in a safe space, and long enough silences are allowed for self-reflection. Noelle doesn't stand at a podium. She sits with them, listens, asks, and isn't afraid to share her own pain as an essential part of the transformation journey. Discrimination doesn't always scream, she once said during a session. Sometimes it's just a glance, a purposeful silence, someone being offered champagne, while someone else is ignored. But Equité isn't just Noelle's story. It's a place that creates space for those who were almost left behind. Jasmine, the young employee who nervously spoke up for Noelle when security escorted her out that day, is now one of the first independent cosmetic designers to have her products featured in Equité's main hall. Her collection, Roots and Radiance, inspired by traditional Jamaican beauty recipes from her grandmother, is displayed near the front window where morning light makes each bottle of serum appear to glow. Customers often ask, "Who created this line?" And the staff always smile and say, "Someone once considered not valuable enough to keep now defining value for us all." Noelle didn't choose to hold the title of the woman who founded change. She chose to leave behind a value system. At the end of each shift, employees gather in the main meeting room, not to report sales, not to showcase achievements, but to answer a simple question one Noelle posed on the first day of Equité's founding. Who did you help shine today? Not a rhetorical question, not a slogan for branding, but a daily reminder that their work, whether it's selling, consulting, or mopping the floors, is part of the larger mission to restore dignity to others. Equité has sold millions of products, but its greatest legacy isn't in the financial reports. It lives in the confident eyes of a 14-year-old girl trying on lipstick for the first time that actually matches her skin tone. It lives in the smile of a single mother welcomed like a VIP, even if she's only purchasing a small jar of cream. And it lives in every story told of a woman once publicly humiliated, who chose not to strike back, but instead to build a world her daughter would never have to be treated the way she was. When Noelle steps out of the training room at the end of the day, the glass door quietly closes behind her, and something invisible, intangible, yet deeply felt is left behind. A legacy, written with conviction, and spread through kindness. Noelle Carter's story didn't begin with power, and it didn't end with revenge either. It is a testament to a simple truth we often forget. Dignity doesn't come from what you wear, but from how you treat others. She didn't destroy to retaliate. She rebuilt to show that a better world is possible. A world where fairness isn't a privilege but the default, and where someone once pushed out the door becomes the one who holds it open for others. If you believe that kindness can still create real change, if you've ever been misjudged just because of how you look, or if you're quietly building your own version of equité no matter how small, like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next stories about justice, dignity, and the power of speaking softly at exactly the right time. Because sometimes, changing the whole world begins with one person who refuses to be disrespected.